start this project by removing all the hardware, giving it a scuff sand, and fixing any of the damages on the piece. Once we're done with all of our sanding, we're going to clean down the entire piece and the drawers with clean slate. This makes sure that all of your sanding particles are removed before your first base layer. We're starting our base layer with one-step paint and light base. We're using this color because it's a clean, simple, easy base because we're going to add a ton of layers and we just want something clean and simple to start with. I'm going to apply this with a synthetic brush. You can choose to use whatever type of brush works for you. I'm going to need to do 2, 3, maybe even 4 coats of this since it's a light color. Your piece of furniture will determine how many coats you need to do. Once our base coat is completely dry, we're going to move on to cracked patina. You're going to need some warm water, a bowl or something to mix in, cracked patina, and a chip brush. Cracked patina is a really great way to get an authentic, aged, chippy, textured finish without having to use sandpaper to remove your layers. It's kind of tough to work with, but once you get the hang of it, it's really fun to play with. So to mix this, you're going to take your cracked patina and just any kind of bowl, Tupperware, anything you have lying around. You're going to put your cracked patina into your Tupperware. And you're going to add just a little bit of warm water. You can experiment with this later, how much water you want to use. The thicker that this goes on, the thicker your crack is going to be. And the thinner that you put it on, the thinner your crack is going to be. So you can experiment with watering it down a little bit to get that thinner crack or using it thicker to get a thicker crack. And I'll show you what that looks like. And you're just going to make sure it's completely mixed. And I apply this with a chip brush. You can do it with a synthetic brush. I really don't think it matters. And it's just that simple. Now it's ready to use. So I'm going to take this and just start to apply it. This is a really sticky substance. There is no way around it. It just is. It takes a little bit of getting used to work with because it's pretty different than any regular paint or sealer or anything like that. But once you get the hang of it, it is pretty fun to work with. Now I want to make sure that this entire thing is covered. I'm not putting it on too thick, but I do want to make sure that every area is saturated. Okay, and once that's done, you're going to let it dry for about 30 minutes. Your temperature is totally going to control that. It's never going to dry completely. It is going to be a little tacky, and that's totally normal. So here is a board that is dry, and it's just a little tacky. You can tell that it is dry, and it's very shiny. So don't be alarmed. This is totally what it's supposed to look like. And at this point, you're ready to layer on your next coat of paint. Okay, once your first coat of cracked patina is totally dry, you're ready to move on to your next color of one-step paint. So I'm going to be using Parisian Gray, and I'm going to apply that with a synthetic brush. You can do it with a chip brush. You can experiment, kind of see what you like better. You're going to need some dry chip brushes. It's really important that they're dry. I like to have a couple different sizes. You can experiment, see what you like better. You're going to want some clean slate, and you are absolutely going to want some paper towels. We are going to use our hands, and this is going to get pretty messy. So it's important that while you're working with your hands and they get dirty, you have the ability to clean them off so that you can keep working. So those are all the things that you're going to need. Totally advise you having them right by you and at the ready. You have to work pretty quick with this stuff. So I'll show you how we do that, a couple different ways, and then you can experiment and see what you like best. So our cracked patina is dry, which means we're ready to move on to our next color of one-step paint. It is a little tacky, but it's never really going to fully dry. You'll be able to tell the difference when it's ready and dry enough versus when you applied it and it was still really wet. So we're going to start with our one-step paint in Parisian Gray. It's a really beautiful light gray color. What I try and do is start with my lightest color first and then build my way darker. You can experiment with starting with darker and building lighter. It'll just give you different colors, different depth. So when applying your next coat, you want to go in the exact same direction that you put on your cracked patina. You're gonna have to work really fast, and you don't want to do this too thick or you'll notice that it's just not gonna work. So it is going to start to dry quick. It's going to start to crack quick. So you got to be quick with your next layer. You want to try and get as much covered as you can. It is going to be a little tough. You don't want to go back over it too many times because you'll notice that it'll start to crack on you. See, we've already got parts here that are starting to bubble, coagulate, whatever you want to call it. So just do your best to lay this on as best as you can and get coverage. It dries really quick. Temperature will totally matter in that. I imagine this might be easier in the winter. Even in Oregon, it is 90 degrees today, so we're working quick. Okay, so that's good enough. We're gonna leave that. If you start to go over it too many times, it's just gonna come up like this, and you don't want that too quick. So this is gonna dry down from the shiny finish that we had from the cracked patina to a matte finish, which is what you get with the one-step paint. So you're already gonna start to see these cracks start right here. And you're gonna have to kind of babysit this. You don't wanna paint it and then walk away. It'll dry too fast and then you'll lose your chance to lift that paint up. So you're gonna kind of watch it for these cracks and kind of wait to see where it's getting matte. And once it's matte, that's when you can start lifting it. When it's still shiny, wet paint, you can't lift it quite yet. So really sit and watch it and see when it's ready. So right here, this is already dry. It's already starting to crack. So we're gonna go ahead with our chip brush and really carefully lay it down and pull it up. And see, this isn't quite ready yet, but it is lifting. You want to be careful not to drag this because it'll just peel off all of the paint you just put down. So you're going to really carefully lay down your chip brush and lift. Only on the areas that are dry. You can probably wait until the entire thing is dry to start this process. What I notice is that in the heat, if it's drying really quickly, I want to start where I can so that it's not all completely dry by the time that I start, otherwise it won't lift at all. Okay, so this is all mostly dry. So aside from a chip brush, I use my hands. Does get messy. You can use that if you want to. So I'm just going to carefully place my hands down and see how it's pulling up that paint. Now this is where we want our pre-done paper towel with clean slate. Mine was not pre-done. You want to be able to clean your hands off. Amy does a really good way of explaining this, that when your hands are too loaded up with product, it becomes a positive tool instead of a negative tool. So a positive tool means you're adding something to your piece, like a paintbrush with paint on it. That's a positive tool. We want to use negative tools because we're removing this first or the second layer of paint. And you can remove as much or as little as you want. And this really gives you that texture and that authentic chipped look. Sandpaper kind of gives you that look that it was purposefully distressed. This really starts to look like that paint wore off over hundreds of years. Once you get the hang of this product, it is so fun to use. Okay, so at this point, I'm gonna be done with this. I'm gonna leave it how it is. I'm gonna let the rest of this totally dry down. Then we can go back with some 220 sandpaper and just kind of sand down those high ridges. We don't want to sand to remove. We're using the cracked patina to remove, but we can sand to kind of get rid of some of these little high points here. So that is our first layer with our cracked patina. So this is a completely dried version of the drawer we just did. I have sanded it down just ever so lightly with some 220 sandpaper. You can choose to do that or not, totally up to you. I choose to leave a lot of this texture. When I'm doing this type of finish, I really want a heavy texture. You can sand it down a little bit more like these areas and still get that chippy look without such a heavy texture. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna do this whole process again. So layer of cracked patina and then another layer of a darker gray. You can totally choose to leave this just like this. If you love the way that this looks as it is, you can leave it. Add some dark wax, some light wax, some gold, go from there. I'm gonna choose to layer this one more time with another color so you really get that extra depth, that white from the base coat that we did the first time, this lighter gray, and then we'll have that darker gray on top. So same process as before, mix your cracked patina. Make sure that once you've sanded this, you've cleaned it off. And then we're gonna go ahead again and lay down this cracked patina over our textured first layer. And you can experiment this time with doing a thinner coat, a thicker coat for that thinner or thicker crack. I am using the same type of mixture. If you wanted to do, you know, your first 2 layers with a thin crack and then your last layer with a really thick crack, that would be really pretty. So we're just gonna cover this whole thing the same way that we did the first time. You really wanna make sure that that first layer is totally dry first, otherwise you're just gonna be moving it around. And same as before, we're gonna let that dry for about 30 minutes, temperature pending, and then we'll revisit this with our next color of one-step paint. So we've got our second coat of cracked patina on this drawer dry, and now we're ready for our next color of one-step paint. We're gonna be using Selznick Gray. Really pretty darker gray color, a little bit warmer than the first gray that we used. And we're gonna go through and apply this the exact same way that we did the first time. So we're gonna apply this with a synthetic brush. We've got our dry chip brushes. We've got a towel with some clean Slate to clean our hands off. And we're gonna get started. So same thing as last time. We're gonna try and apply this as quickly as we can, going in the same direction. I find that it's a little bit easier to apply the second time. I don't know why that is, but it is. So we've already got this starting to lift here. So working quickly is really just the name of the game with this stuff. Okay, we're gonna leave that. And same thing as last time. When you see this start to crack and mattifying, that's when it's ready to pull. When it's still shiny, like wet paint, not ready yet. So we're just gonna monitor this, kind of babysit it. Again, you don't wanna paint it and then walk away, because if it fully dries, you're not gonna be able to pull that color off. So I'm gonna start to try and pull this, and it's not quite ready yet. And it's okay to kind of try and pull it, and if it's not ready, you'll notice that nothing came off. These edges are usually ready first. And remember, we don't want to drag the brush, but just lift. And when you get that excess paint on your chip brush, just make sure to try and wipe it off. We don't want this to become a positive tool. And just the same way that we did before, just lifting that second color up. And when you do this with multiple layers, it really gives you a really amazing depth. You're starting to see that white that we had as our first layer, that lighter gray that we had as our second layer. I imagine that this would also work well with a sea sponge. I use sea sponges with Toscana milk paint a lot. I have not tried it with cracked patina. That might be a fun experiment. And you want to try and do this pretty light-handedly. It's better to have to kind of go back over it a couple times than take too much off the first time. Okay, so now I'm gonna go in with my hands and kind of just start to pull it off that way. And again, you can remove as little or as much as you want, totally up to you and the finish that you're going for. I'm really just trying to remove enough so that we can see both of those other colors underneath. So now that our hands are totally saturated, those are becoming positive tools and we don't want that. So we're gonna clean our hands down so that we can keep using them. When your hands get too much product buildup on them, it will just start to put product back down onto your surface rather than clean hands, which have the ability to remove. So just be careful with your brushes and your hands that those aren't becoming positive tools. Okay, so I'm gonna call that good. I love the way that this looks. You've got really good depth here. You can see that lighter gray, you can see that white from the light base underneath, and this darker kind of taupe gray. This is exactly what I'm going for. So we're gonna set this aside and let it completely dry. We're gonna repeat both of those steps with the light gray and the dark gray on the entire piece and all of the drawers, and then we'll come in for the final touches with the details. Once we're finished with all of our cracked patina and our paint layers, we're gonna finish this piece with some clear wax, some dark antique wax, some bright bronze and deep gold mica powders, and some dust of ages. We're gonna apply all of these with a couple different chip brushes, dry ones. And we're just gonna use all of these to kind of blend everything together. So this is our completed drawer. We've got all of our layers of cracked patina and different grays with that white base. So we're gonna go in with some waxes and some mica powders just to kind of tie this all together. So I'm gonna take clear wax first with just a chip brush. I'm gonna load up my chip brush and I'm gonna go over the entire thing. You can use whatever wax brush you prefer. And I just want to saturate this whole thing before I put any dark wax on it. Next, we're going to take our dark antique wax. We're going to do the same thing, but lighter. So you don't want to load up your brush too much. If you want, you can tap off the excess on a towel or a rag. And we're just going to go through starting at the edges and working our way inward. I do want most of this piece to have that dark wax kind of ambery color. I think it really helps to tie everything together and really give it that old world look. So just really lightly in the center, heavier on the edges. And you can do as much or as little of this as you would like to. Next, we're going to take our Dust of Ages. This is a really cool product. It's basically just, it's dust. It's like kind of a gray brown color, and it really helps to add some depth. So we're going to dip our brush in here and then tap off the excess. And I'm just going to apply this kind of in the corners and along this ridge here. You might not be able to see it very well, but I think it really does kind of help to add just a little extra layer of texture. Now I'm going to take the same brush and I'm going to start using mica powder. So I'm going to use the deep gold and I'm going to use bright bronze. That just got everywhere. That's okay. Okay. Anyway, we're going to take our same brush that we used for Dust of Ages. We're going to dip it into our mica powder and we're just going to start applying this kind of in the corners, just sporadically, just to give it a little bit of shimmer. And I'm using a dry brush. These mica powders are really cool. I often use them where I mix some of the powder with a clear coat, and that creates kind of more of a paint or a paste. And you can use that with like a small artist brush to like just detail your high edges. So I use these often. And same thing, you want to dip your brush in and then tap off the excess. I think this will just help give this its little extra touch. And I just kind of want to feather this in the center just to kind of give that shimmer everywhere. And then we're going to go back with our bright bronze. I often mix these two together because the deep gold can be a little bit brighter than I'd like it to, and this kind of bronze tone really tones it down a bit. Now I've already got a lot going on there. I'm just kind of going to feather this anywhere that I put that gold, kind of tone it down just a little bit. And I'm going to take a clean brush and kind of just feather out that excess there. Add a little bit of that gold. And these steps are totally optional. You do not have to do these. I think that this will just kind of help tie everything together for the vision that I have for this piece. And I think that those waxes really just kind of help everything blend. I'm going to do a little extra dark antique wax kind of in these areas. And those are going to be my final touches on this piece. I am really happy with how it turned out. I think that this chippiness is perfect. I love these little highlights of shimmer. I think once it's all put together, it's going to look fabulous. I'm really happy with how this finish turned out. I love working with cracked patina, and I can't wait to do another one. Thanks everybody for watching.